Hello, Andy. This is Colin. I won't be able to get in tonight. I'm sweating like a pig. 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 I'm sweating like a pig.
Hi, and welcome to Tangents on Everything and Nothing. Today we will be talking to Cody Leaderbrand of Owen Valley Winery. But first I'd like to say thank you to the Owen Valley Public Library for letting us stream here and looking at the reflection of stuff in my glasses. Isn't that great? And this is a great place. You should utilize your local library because they have plenty of free resources for you to use, but not abuse. Definitely take care of your local library because they take care of us, all of us. Lots of information, education, books, radios, CDs, movies, more. You can even check them out online and get audio books. It's a wonderful resource with endless uses. And you can also be like me and stream from the local library. But we're going to move on. We talked to Cody Leaderbrand yesterday and had a great time talking with him and look forward to doing some more shows with him in the future. We get a little more specific. We're looking at doing something specifically on yeast, another one where we're doing stuff on how to basically make wine yourself at home, simple things like that. So tune in every Monday at 6:30. Or check us out at anchor.fm, timeofyourhalflife.com, and you'll be lots of good information coming forward to you soon. So thank you, and here we go with the interview. We do really appreciate everything and letting us come over to the winery, Cody. And thanks, Anthony, for setting that up. We'll be doing some more and visiting them again soon, but now enjoy the show. We'll go ahead and get started.
Sure, yeah.
My name's John Simon, and we're on Tangents and Everything and Nothing, and you are Cody
Leaderbrand.
Cody Leaderbrand.
That's right.
Awesome. And you work for?
Owen Valley Winery.
Yep. So today we're here at Owen Valley Winery. We're in the special barrel room.
This is our aging room.
Aging room? Okay.
Yeah, not all wines get this level of treatment, but a certain number do, as you can see. So we have a varying size barrel program depending on the year. But
okay. How long do they stay in their barrels?
Again, dependent on the variety, the style that we're shooting for. You know, like these guys maybe 8 to 10 months. These guys maybe 12 to 14. These ones over the camera sitting on are actually at 14 as we speak. So
awesome. What's the longest?
For us, that is the longest right now. It's 14, at least currently in this building. We've done some 16, 18 month agings before, but some wineries around the world will age for up to a decade in a barrel.
Yeah, and you don't have the room for that.
No, that's a time commitment. You know, when you get to thinking about wines, and especially as a young winemaker, you only get so many shots at it. It's like bourbon. You know, by the time you make your bourbon and age it for a decade, you're a decade later, and still you know it takes a decade to learn from your mistakes.
Now, I make mead. I haven't made it in a while. And I was never, all the recipes I read were like, now wait X amount of months.
Sure.
But I came up with my own recipe, which was as soon as it clears, it's good to go.
Yeah.
And it's intended to be drink.
Immediately,
yeah. What's your preference? Something like that or a little bit of aging?
You know, I actually like a lot of styles, and I'm the same way with food. I'm not real picky when it comes to food, and especially as a winemaker, you have to come to appreciate all styles of drink. You know, and I'm stereotypical in that. In the summertime, I like a nice crisp white wine, or in the wintertime, I like a nice dry red. So, and I think that's wine in a nutshell. It tends to mold itself to different situations.
Okay.
But if I had to absolutely pick, I would say crisp white wine is my absolute preference. Let me mute my phone before I forget.
Oh, we actually have a tally going on how many times somebody's phone has gone off.
Well,
luckily you're catching it before.
That's right. There we go.
Yeah, I think our current tally is guests are at 9, so we put them all in one group.
Nice.
I'm at 5, Jeremiah's at 4, and Sam's at 4 or 3. I don't know.
Nice.
But yeah, we forget every now and then.
That's all right.
Yeah.
It does. It does happen.
All right, so let's start with the basics. How did you get into wine?
Sure. The absolute, clear pointing finger is my parents. It started in the family. The winery stuff started when I was a very young teenager with my parents, making it in our kitchen, in our garage, in our shed. It's funny, my earliest memory of my dad making wine was me seeing a bag hanging in the shed that said banana on it. And it did not look like bananas. It was some sort of, fluid, and I asked the question of why that said bananas, because it seemed pretty bananas. And it was wine, and they were trying to start making wine. And then as I got older, my grandparents purchased this property that we're on here in Owen County, and the intention was to make wine and grow grapes, casually speaking. And as all casual things tend to go, it snowballed into something else.
Excellent.
And for me, when I officially came here to work, I think 5 years ago, I did not intend on making wine. That was not my goal. My goal was to help temporarily, and then maybe catapult into something else. And here I am 5 years later, no regrets, and I love it, man. It's I don't think I'll do anything else ever again.
Now I like wines, but I like fruity wines. Something that makes it a little different. And in all honesty, my favorite is the blueberry wine from here.
Okay, yep.
Hands down. I've had other blueberries wines from other places. This is my biased opinion. That is my favorite.
Well, thank you.
What other fruits have you done? What do you like? What do you want to work with?
Good question. So we've done a lot of different fruit wines. In the past few years, we've primarily worked with things that we can source here locally in Indiana. That's a really big part of our operation is, if you can get it from Indiana, you try really hard to do so. And for that reason, blueberries are something that we've worked with before. Those come from northern Indiana. We make a lot of blackberry wine right now. Blackberries come from actually not too far from your District 6 farms, 45 minutes away from here.
Okay.
So that's primarily what I'm working with right now. We also do a lot of persimmon wine. Oddly enough, it's I famously say it's my least favorite thing to work with, just because they're so messy.
Yeah.
And if you know persimmons, they're just horrible.
Yeah.
No matter what the context, unless they're in a persimmon pudding, which then they could be arguably okay.
I'll agree with that. I've had your persimmon gold. I don't think you were working here when I had that though, because that was years ago. That was actually pretty good.
Yeah,
I did like that one.
It's a unique wine. It's not a lot of people can really. I mean, it tastes like persimmons primarily, but it's got some weird spice elements that kind of pick up from the fermentation process. So it's a little unique, I will say.
Is there anything you would particularly like to try or do, fruit grape, whatever? What is a future goal for something you would like to experiment with?
Future goal, I really want to dabble in sparkling wine, and we've talked about doing that extensively here. It's and not carbonated wine, true sparkling bottle fermented wine, and that's a difficult process to get your head around, especially in mass.
I've blown a few bottles.
It's such a scary proposition to do hundreds of gallons of that.
Right.
And cross your fingers and hope things don't go awry. But that's kind of winemaking in mass at large, at least for us. Yeah. None of us are formally trained winemakers. A lot of what we know is school of hard knocks. You screw it up and then you try again. Yeah. It's a fun way to learn. It's a scary way to learn. But once now I feel relatively confident. But that's something that I would like to tackle someday, particularly with we just expanded our vineyard with some varieties that I would like to sparkle.
I saw that driving in. I was like, well, that's where the Harvest Moon event used to be, and now it's even more.
More grapes. That's right.
Yes.
No, we're very fortunate. Business has been well through COVID and. And just in general, recent times, our business is doing well, and the need for more grapes is evident. So we're taking a stab at it.
Excellent. What would you say is one of the key things for wine in general that you'd say to avoid any mistakes?
When it comes to making it, that is. Do your research.
Mm-hmm.
You absolutely have to read. Understand that what you're doing is you're doing controlled spoilage. I mean, your mead, your fruit, your grapes.
Yep.
You're controlling how they spoil so that you may preserve them at a optimal point. And capturing that point is the hardest part. Once they reach this this apex of good flavor, the stability being part of that, you want to really capture that. And it's really hard to teach that without reading about it. It is a chemistry-driven process, and for success to be had without school of hard knocks like I've gone through, you definitely want to read about it, or come talk to me about it. I mean, if somebody has an interest in wine, I'm happy to talk to people about it.
I think we can put together another show where we do just that.
Sure,
absolutely.
Yeah.
From my personal experience, it came down to the very first rule is cleanliness.
Oh yeah, sanitation absolutely is key.
Then it's ingredients, and then it's patience.
Patience is the toughest part for a lot of people. My favorite thing is, being a winery, a lot of people will bring in wine they made before, and they'll say, "Oh, try my wine. I want to know what you think." And it's like, okay, sure. I'm happy to entertain that and be gentle to people because they're just having fun with it, right? It's just a hobby. But sometimes you'll get a wine in and it's still bubbling. It's not stopped.
Isn't ready.
That's right. That's right. You should put this back away and just give it some time. People are just excited to make something.
I did a strawberry banana wine.
Yeah.
And I'm used to the stuff I do is about 4 months of fermentation, and it stops and clears and looks great.
Yep.
And it's been like clockwork, everything I was doing with my needs especially. Well, I did this banana and strawberry. It took over a year.
Wow.
And when it clarified, I will say I was proud of it. It was very Jolly Rancher-esque.
Okay, yeah.
But it was one of those, it was the bananas alone that caused it to take that extra time. Yeah.
The softer the fruit, the more difficult it is to work with, and that's why I think nobody's ever seen. I've not seen a commercial persimmon wine before. They get so soft during the fermentation, and mechanically pressing large amounts of that is just very difficult.
Yeah.
And the same probably with bananas. That's why you see a lot of blueberries and blackberries. They're relatively similar to grapes as far as their texture goes.
Okay, I've got a question off the top of my head for that one. Is how big is your press?
Our press is a 1.5 ton press. So that'll hold, depending on the variety, 180 gallons of wine at one pressing. Okay. That was an upgrade that we just got this year. The year prior to that was a 60-gallon press. And that was very difficult because in the past few years we've grown substantially, as I mentioned. Yeah. With that comes, the growth of more fruit. This year alone, we processed 60,000 pounds of fruit. 60,000
pounds. That's what, 2 semis?
Probably, yeah. I think I did the math once. It was like 8.5 elephants, and then I was like, well, you can't really half an elephant, so let's just find another measuring scale. But it's a lot of fruit, and I would say 90% of that is picked by hand from the farmers, which we are part of that farming team. And then once they get to this facility, sometimes they get moved by hand again. It's a very laborious.
Well, grapes are hard to harvest, especially mechanically.
Yes, they are. And the mechanical equipment to harvest them is very expensive. I think entry-level mechanical harvester is $500,000. And
drop in the bucket, right?
That's right.
Yeah, pun intended.
Yeah, easy peasy. So, no, a lot of our fruit here on the estate is picked with the help of friends, family, volunteers, wine club members.
Nice.
People love to get out. Some people like to get out and experience it, and once they've had the experience, that's enough.
I can't imagine why.
Yeah, some people do actually fall in love with it. It is a somewhat magical experience. As you do more of it, the magic wears off. But I still get excited at harvest time. I mean, it's a fun time of year.
Because that's when the experiments start, right?
That's when you get to play around a little bit, and it's the culmination of a year's worth of labor. There's not many things that, other than agriculture, where you work on it all year long, and then you hope to the very bitter end that it actually works out. And maybe a lot of things are that way, but that's my yearly thing, and we're starting that process here in a few weeks with pruning. We start pruning the vineyard here in a few weeks.
Well, not too far from growing season. Probably a little more advanced question than a beginning sort of intro to this would be.
Sure.
Yeast. How many different types of yeasts do you use?
That's a good question. There's a variety of yeasts because yeasts are different in every environment. You know, the yeast that we have here naturally here in Indiana may be different from what they have in France. So accessing those yeasts and utilizing them, especially, you know, if you consider France has been making wine for thousands of years at this point, they have some knowledge on what they're doing.
Just a little bit.
And they've gotten to the point where they know what flavors that these yeasts produce, right? So we use anywhere from a dozen to 15 to 16 yeasts within a calendar year. That's something that I really like to diversify for each wine. I really want, because with Indiana wines, I mean, you got to think, especially grapes, there is no history to this, right? There's a very, very loose history. So we're writing that history right now. And if you're not willing to experiment as a young winemaker, you kind of miss your shot, right? You never know what it could have been. So I like, if once I hit a recipe or find a yeast that I really like, I'll stick with it.
Okay.
And, you know, to name one, 71B is something that I use very often. It's a very fruit-driven yeast, which people like fruity wines here in Indiana. But if you know, a particular wine, say this wine here, I didn't really care for the yeast, or it was okay, it wasn't something to write home about, I'll change it next year and do something different. But keep the style, you know, put it back in the barrel, treat it all the same, but change the yeast, and it can be a totally different wine.
Okay.
There's also some interest in, right now, particularly wild fermentations.
I was actually going to lead up to that.
So wild fermentations are this, you know, you let the wild yeast take over because Saccharomyces cerevisiae is what we use in wineries primarily. That's the main yeast strain most wineries use. But there's tons and tons and tons. I don't know off the top of my head how many yeast strains, probably an unmeasurable amount.
We'll just go with millions easily.
Right.
Yeah.
And so this year, I actually started experimenting with wild fermentations. There have been some yeast strains that have been identified that are amiable, if you will, to winemaking, where they won't produce yucky flavors, essentially. Because wild yeast can produce, you know...
Which goes back to your controlled spoilage.
Exactly. That's exactly right. So I did some of that this year. I don't remember the name of the yeast off the top of my head, but actually this wine I keep pointing at right here is one of those that I did that with.
Okay. Well, I think that's something we could definitely do as a show in the future and deep dive into yeast itself. I've had a few people give me their experimental wild yeast stuff, and can't say it was always a pleasurable thing. Sometimes it works, and a lot of times it doesn't. And unfortunately, a lot of times it's tough. To speak to wild yeast strains, I'm sure it's not the case for all wineries in Champagne, but in Champagne, there's several estates that I know of that what they do is they'll pick their fruit a week or so early. They'll bring it back. They'll let all these different fruits from different vineyards start their wild fermentation, and they'll taste through them. And once they find a yeast strain that, you know, is amiable again to what the style they're looking to make, they'll take that yeast strain, ship it to a lab, isolate it, and then that's the yeast they'll use for that year. Each year is a different yeast strain, and they just know that their environment is going to, you know, make these yeast strains. Any plans for you to try to cultivate your own side project, maybe?
We've talked about it in jest. You know, I have a few petri dishes that have had some unsavory things growing in them once or twice, but it's not my forte. You know, I'm not a trained chemist. Again, it's I know enough to be dangerous, and I've done some reading.
Yeah, good.
But past that, no lab grade knowledge in this building right now. Unless you're a trained chemist, and I didn't know.
Oh, absolutely not.
Okay.
It was just something I thought of, and especially with you mentioning that you have some experimentals out there. And
yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, that was something definitely to watch. What flavor, or is that something you can go into, or what type of wine is it supposed to be?
The yeast strain that I chose, that was the wild yeast strain that I chose, was supposed to give the wine more body, so weight to the mouthfeel. And it was supposed to produce a more yeasty, baked bread kind of a profile. Okay. So you don't really see that too often in wines unless they're aged champagne. Aged champagne historically has a bready taste, but so this is a white wine in these barrels here that are next to us. It's called Vignoles. It's a small clustered grape that grows here in Indiana and, you know, the Midwest in general.
The deer goes on my property all the time.
Okay, yeah. And so it typically has really big, bold pineapple flavors.
Nice. Okay.
So historically, people have made, you know, a sweet. It's very high in acid, so it's a very acidic grape. So it typically needs made sweet. So I've been taking a different look at vignoles. There's a big hole in Indiana for a grape that doesn't perform like Chardonnay. People love Chardonnay. I don't.
I don't know why they do either.
But people do love Chardonnay. So stylistically, I've been trying to make something like a Chardonnay so that we can, say, yeah, we can produce this like this in Indiana. And this is my experiment towards that. Getting a little bit closer, but this year I changed a few things, and we'll see what happens.
Excellent. Now I've read of some stuff on wine, obviously, and done my own wining or venting.
Sure.
I've also looked in some of the desired flavors and textures, and the one that I came across, which I felt was the most undesirable, but for some reason has an audience out there, is rubber.
Rubber?
The taste of rubber. Why would you want burnt rubber or even rubber in general in your wine?
That's a good question.
Yeah.
I think from the knowledge that I have, the rubber profile comes a lot out of Spain. It's and these weird flavors, we typically call them tertiary profiles. These are profiles that our environment is creating, not the grapes themselves. The grapes themselves typically will be very fruity, or they'll have some fruit aspect. They'll have some other maybe unique qualities to them. Say like vignoles kind of tastes. It's got these tropical flavors. Those tend to be the tertiary flavors of that grape. So rubber then, as the wine ages, develops this weird nuance that, to an average consumer like us, we're like, not for me. But, big time wine people are like, oh, you don't get rubber out of anything else but Spanish Rioja. So that makes it unique and cool. Now, that's old world winemaking. New world winemaking tends to be very heavy, focused on fresh, fruity qualities, the qualities that we probably like. They it's part of our culture. Like sweet wines, they're a part of our culture. So these things tend to be, you see those more New World areas. California is considered New World. New York, anything in India, not India, United States is New World. And even South America to some degree is a lot of New World. Australia, but these regions, you'll find that our neighbors and our friends and family, they're the ones that they like primarily, and that's why French wine is like this weird thing. Spanish wine can be this kind of weird thing.
Oh, I like it when friends come in from out of state, try to introduce them to a lot of the local stuff. It's you're artisans. Got to promote you and everybody else who's around here because it's the local area. I'm proud of it, and the reactions I get from some people is either, wow, this is really good, to they have their tastes are set a certain way, and nothing I can show them is going to be good in their eyes. Good. I see
meet the bar.
Yeah, I see the same wave coming from anybody who's from Europe, tasting our wines and kind of going, oh yeah.
It's very different, and the new and the old world, they are totally different, styles and ideals, and I try to take some appreciation from that because I do actually love French wine. French wine is my preference when it comes to wine other than Indiana, but only because I am devoted to it. I can understand why a regular consumer wouldn't find that, and that's kind of what I try to tell people that come out here. We'll get customers a lot of the time that say, "I'll have a Cabernet Sauvignon" or "I'll have a Chardonnay," and it's like, okay, well, I respect that decision. I can't grow those grapes physically; they will not grow in India. They'll die. So, but try this wine, Chambourcin or Vignoles. It is like that, and stylistically, they can be somewhat similar. They still are going to be different, and that's the hardest thing to teach a consumer because I think we're so adapted to everything's available everywhere we go, no matter where we're at. I know I can buy a phone charger in every gas station I ever see on the planet, and that's just something that I know because consumerism has taught me that, and we're trying to reteach that. These and that's a really heavy focus for using the local stuff. This is Indiana. There is no Cabernet Sauvignon, so either in it, and then once they start to think about it, open up their mind a little bit, they're like, okay, I can dig that because that's not only a unique product, that's a message behind the product, and that's powerful.
Now the pear wine, do you guys still make that? I haven't looked for it lately. I'm assuming it's still out there.
We haven't made it in a couple years. Okay. So last year we had a really nasty frost. No, this is a new year. sorry, 2020 we had a really nasty frost. 2021 not so nasty.
Okay.
But what happened was historically our pear wine has been a small batch, less than 50 gallons, usually just enough to put it in the bottle and get it on the shelf for a month, and then it goes. And last year we had a kind of a bumper crop for grapes, and I just had no space for small lots. I was really dedicated to the larger lots, and from a business standpoint, it was it makes it easier on me instead of making 50 small batches to make 12 big ones. So I'd like to bring pear back. There's a couple trees here on the property. There's a couple trees across the street, and there's a few down the road that we have access to. And between all those, we can make copious amounts of pear wine. Something that happened this year that's new is there's a gentleman in Gosport that's got an orchard. He's got old French apples. He's got new, like Red Delicious kind of. I said new Red Delicious, GMO grapes, I guess you will. I don't think they're GMO, but that's what I'm gonna say. The hybrid apples. Anyways, so he's got a press that we have access to, and for us to be able to take pears to him, press them properly, because we were chopping them up, fermenting on the whole pear, and it was just a mess. If we could process them appropriately, we could maximize the yield, and then maybe actually make good pear wine. Because something that we're trying to really change is our cider program. We do make ciders here. They tend to be very difficult because the low alcohol means you can't store them like this for long periods of time. They're much more finicky for long-term storage, so they got to be drank immediately. Which means unless I'm constantly making cider all the time, sometimes it comes, sometimes it goes. So something we're working on the to-do list, if you will. The to-do list we talked about.
Yeah. So the future things. What other future growths are you looking at?
I would like to increase our presence throughout the state, and I mean that through a wholesale perspective.
Yeah.
Right now, most of our wine goes direct to consumer, meaning the consumer comes here, they buy it, and they take it home.
Yeah, I used to be able to go the lazy way, go down to Staffers, grab a bottle or two, and go home. And I've noticed there tends to be little to no Owen Valley Winery down there.
Yes, the wholesale market's tough. The expectation is, so I'll take our most popular wine, for example, Crimson Cream. That is by far our best seller, and here on the property, I can sell it for $14 a bottle. When it comes to manufacturing, we can make it for about a half of that, right? I mean, we're making 100% markup, if you will. When it comes to wholesale, you got to figure in the middleman and the markup of the liquor store. So we have to sell this bottle of wine to the distributor for $5 or $6. They mark their wine up, 25%, and then the liquor store gets their cut. And being small, every dollar counts. So we've tried to sell everything through the property. Well, we're finally growing to the point where we can talk about, okay, we've made enough for us here on the property this year. Let's get the rest out, and maybe we can mark it down a little bit, offer it a little bit more competitive price. So that's something I'm working on. It's unfortunately, with all manufacturing, it's a numbers game, and it's a quantity game.
Yeah, and once you get to the quantity, then you can start worrying about the rest.
Yes. Another thing that we want to be really cautious of is how big we get. We don't want to be a big conglomerate winery. We like being small. We like talking with our neighbors and our friends, and being able to, at the end of the day, not have to, worry about an empire crumbling under our feet. This is about family. This is my family's winery. We love what we do. We love the property. We love where it's at, and keeping it a manageable size. Employing a good few people, and being happy with that.
That brings up an interesting economic aspect of it, to where do you want to build this to where it's constantly having to grow and worry about a crumbling empire, or make something that is sustainable?
Right.
And I'm definitely more for the sustainable aspect, because that seems to be better overall for the local area, the harvest, the owners.
Yes. Yeah. There's a balance with this that, being a person still outside of just a winemaker, and I think a lot of people have this with their careers and stuff, managing work-life balance. And this is tough because it's very demanding. We have the agriculture side that we manage, the manufacturing and chemistry side, where I stand, and then you have the retail side. and you got to manage all three of these aspects. It's, you know, in symphony. Otherwise, the other two fail. If one, you know, if one falls, the other two are just, you know, without. Yeah.
So, okay, slight tangent here. What do you do other than making wine?
In my free time, I actually like to play Dungeons and Dragons.
Sweet.
And that is if I could do that full time, that would be great. But I do love this, so I'm trying to do a 50-50.
That's hard. I mean, because there is a way to get paid being a dungeon master.
There is.
But at the same time, are you willing to produce that much to where you're playing 10 hours a day for people?
I don't think so.
Nah, same here.
That's a lot of work. And you know, with the things that I love, I don't want to tarnish the things that I love with the thought of $1. I want to keep it to a thing I love.
Yeah, keep the things happy.
That's right. That's
awesome.
right.
So, anything else outside of role playing?
You know, I like video games. You know, I'm married, so I have a wife and my dog. No kids right now.
Oh, that's fine.
So that's right. She's enough. She's more than enough. Other than that, man, it's this. I mean, I'm fully dedicated to this. Indiana's not a place you would think, man, they make really good wine. And I take that as a personal jab sometimes. Probably shouldn't, but I do. So I work really hard with a lot of other growers throughout the state. So sometimes in my days off, I'll go help another winery.
Nice.
You know, friends that I have made throughout the industry, and keep them going, share the knowledge, share the burden. And what's happening now is some of these guys we've been helping for a couple of years now, or I've been spending time with, we're growing to the point where we actually can financially support them by buying their fruit, buying their excess,
nice.
and actually utilizing it here instead of them just, you know, it going to waste. Because, you know, something a lot of wineries will do is they'll bottle a lot of wine and then they'll sit on it, try to sell it for a long time. And that wine just ages out over time, you know, it doesn't last forever. And if I could instead take some of those grapes, bring them here, process them, and actually distribute the fruit, better for everybody.
Absolutely. When I make my stuff, I don't like to add preservatives.
Sure, yeah.
Mine, when I make it with the intent to, here, drink it, enjoy it this weekend, enjoy it next month, enjoy it in a couple months from now. Do it before then, and just let it go. So I avoid, again, the metabisulfates and all that, and try to keep it simple.
Sure, yeah.
Because with all this, it's meant to be enjoyed, not sit on a shelf until your great grandkids decide to open it.
A lot of wine, I think the statistic right now is 90% of wine that's in the market, not just us, you know, the market in general, is meant to be drank within 5 years. Most wine is not meant to be aged. So, and you know, I'm a bad example of this because I'm aging a lot of wine that doesn't need to be aged. But you know, if you go to your grandfather's house and he says he's got this old, you know, woodchuck something from 1976, there's probably a good chance it's you know turned south and you know is a relic beyond the wine in the bottle.
Well, it's like, what's your opinion? This is a Louis XIV wine bottle. It was made 300 years ago and has been sitting on the shelf in some basement for a while. The chances of that $3 million bottle actually being worth drinking, or you just keep it for that value and never open it, even though.
You know, I think I think wine historically was not that, right? I mean, wine back in the day was, you know, a means of getting drunk and, you know, feeling imbibing, right? And
getting drunk, making sure you weren't drinking something with something alive in it.
Right, exactly. Yeah. And, you know, over time, the excess, they tried to figure out ways to preserve it longer, and then it got to this aging thing where, you know, if we age it forever, and then now, I don't say now because I think the curve is changing to speak to the aging things for 50, 60, 70 years and then pulling it out and drinking it. You know, I think that's interesting to some degree. Am I going to go invest thousands of dollars in a bottle of wine? Absolutely not. And if somebody does, you know, no harm, no foul, but you're right. At some point, the wine turns into something else.
Yeah, if that's something they want to do, I'm not going to stop anybody from it.
Right.
I just have a hard time seeing the point because to me, this is meant to be enjoyed, not looked at.
Enjoyed in this lifetime, at least.
Yes.
That's to speak again to the fact that, you know, you only get so many shots at making this. My favorite thing to do, and sometimes it is hard, is to share, because I'll store these wines and have them under the, you know, I got them in my little cellar or my little aging rack, and it's like, the friends are coming over, we should grab a bottle of wine. Do I grab something cheap, or do I grab something that, you know, I was holding back? It is special. And I like to share those wines. In fact, we'll share them with the staff a lot of the time. You know,
Nice.
old stuff that we've held back for a few years, and you can't find right now, but here it is. Enjoy it and see what it's about. And sometimes they're just not good. Sometimes they're great, right? It's just it's the shot you take.
Yeah. How long is it going to really sit on that shelf?
That's right.
I had another question. I know you've, as a company, have given grapes to Civilian.
Yeah.
Hey Ben, this is a shout out to you. Please support the channel. He makes his grape soda out of it, and I keep missing it every time. I hear it's phenomenal, but I like seeing that sort of interaction between the local groups. Yeah. Is there anybody else? Because you said you help some of the other wineries and stuff like that. Is there anything else? I wouldn't say necessarily wine related that you do projects like that with.
We've talked about many times taking the grape pumice that's left over, the skins, the pulp, after we've extracted the juice, and finding a farmer that we could take those to, that they could feed cattle or pigs. Facilitating that is hard because it's, again, for the farmer, it's not a consistent feed. Right. And in years past, it's only been like, I say only 5,000 pounds of leftover material. But like this year, it was 60,000 pounds. And, I'm just composting it for our own personal needs. We'll work it in the flower beds here on the property. Yeah. But it would be great to take that to a farmer and, maybe offset his costs for a few weeks, and that way they're being utilized. It would be really nice to make jams and jellies out of all these different varieties of grapes that we're utilizing. And,
that's a whole other building.
That's right. That's right. And it's just something that hasn't come to fruition yet. We used to actually take the leftover persimmon pulp to the hilltop in years back, and they would make persimmon pudding out of the fermented persimmon matter. And that, in the baking process cooks off the alcohol. Right. So then you're left with this uniquely flavored persimmon pudding. I don't know whatever happened with that, but
yeah, that'd be nice to know what that tasted like.
Yeah, I don't actually remember, and persimmon pudding's not my first pick, so I probably would have went with pecan pie anyways. But
I'm more of a lemon meringue myself.
There you go.
Now back to the new vineyard you've planted out there. Yep. You've expanded into that field. What's going to happen to Harvest Moon?
It'll be the same. We're trying to bring it in, consolidate it, maybe change it a little bit. There's been talks of maybe looking for a different place to have it, maybe not necessarily on the property if we ever get to that point, but the neighbors have also shown some interest in letting us utilize their space for maybe parking and moving it to the other side of the field.
Oh, that'd be nice. Yeah.
So there's still some options for now. It depends on how the growth of the festival goes, but should be the same for at least next few years.
All right. How long has the festival been going on? Now, mind you, I don't remember, even though I was at the very first one. I was one of the vendors, and went up in the hot air balloon and had a great time.
Sure, yeah.
But that's been how many years now?
I want to say 10 or 11. I don't remember. It's definitely approaching a decade, if not crested that mark. Okay. So, yeah, for a few years now.
Okay. For those out there who are listening, Harvest Moon happens late fall, October, November-ish, depending.
1st of October is typically the target. First Saturday of October.
First Saturday of October. So keep that on your calendars. Great place to check out.
Yeah.
Let's see. We talked about what you have in the barrels now. We've talked about potential futures, the development of the place. You've been here for 5 years now.
5 years full time. Family properties.
Pretty much been sucked into it, which I can't blame you. This would be an absolute dream to do.
It's intoxicating in all the right ways.
and the safe ways too, so you can drive home.
That's right. Absolutely.
Job, right?
That's right.
Okay. Let's see. Take a look at this and make some noise on the microphone. All right. I'm going for about 25 minutes. Is there anything else you'd like to add to this, or?
I appreciate you coming out. It's difficult to share this sometimes because we are so heads down in the process of doing it. It's a very labor intensive thing. Come out as they see all the different facets that there is to get involved, whether through employment or through just being around it and coming out and visiting and seeing what's going on. The agriculture side, is very interesting to some, whereas the chemistry side and the fascination of barrels and the aspect of time affecting a product and making something and letting it sit for a year, who would do that? And it's and then the whole side of just enjoying that product when it's all said and done, especially stuff that's made here in Indiana. It's important to us to keep utilizing, especially to speak to like the apple guy we found this year. He's been trying to find a place for his orchard apples for years now, and he actually started resorting to selling them at a farmer's market. But he's retired. I mean, he doesn't want to go to farmers markets every week and try to peddle. He had crab apples specifically. He has lots of crab apples, and crab apples aren't very good to eat.
They're good to ferment. But,
they're great for fermentation, but they're very, very sour. So he was trying to sell crab apples to people, and obviously not getting the traction he wanted. So he found us out here, and actually we had an old apple press that was out of commission, and with the intention of making cider here on the property. And he said, "Look, man, we'll give you the apple press. You get it working, and press your apples, and we'll buy the juice from you, and we'll start this relationship." And actually finishing the fermentation on the cider right now. He brought it in a few weeks back, and it's just about finished, and going to be going to keg here soon.
How long till it's actually ready for distribution? Because I want some.
I'd say 3 to 4 weeks. We'll definitely post about it on Facebook, because it's a relationship that we're proud of, and it's one of the many relationships like that we've facilitated. The blackberries are another great example. Our blackberry grower, Austin Witt, he grows, like I said, 5 acres, 6 acres of blackberries, and sells them to Piazza Produce, the good ones. But the problem with most people, if you know fruit, is that not all of them are good.
Right.
Some of them look a little blemished, or grow irregularly, and to a consumer in Kroger's, that doesn't look very nice.
Right.
They're going to pick the good ones and leave the bad ones. They call those seconds. So we buy all of his seconds and turn them into wine. So all of our blackberry wine that we sell on the shelf right now is from him, and we actually have some in the barrels behind me here, bourbon barrel aged blackberry wine.
I've got a question for him, if you could ever ask him.
Sure, yeah.
How does he keep the deer away? Because all the blackberries at my place, they're, deer and birds, because you see them, they're about to turn ripe, and you're sitting there like, all right, we'll pick some in the morning, and then they're gone. That's all it takes. Overnight, and then they're gone.
I think with him, and we're a lot the same way, once you grow in such quantities, there's always the tithe by nature. They take their portion, and you just, accept it. I know last year, so with blackberries, he was telling me the more it rains, the more they produce. It's not so much, and with rain, I guess, they're producing more because they have the moisture in the water to do so, but it also makes them soft. So he couldn't keep up with picking because we had a really wet summer last year.
Right.
He couldn't keep up with picking, and a lot of them went to waste. So we actually got a lot of blackberries last year from him. Thus, for the bourbon barrel aged, we had to diversify the product, but we like doing that because I hate to see fruit thrown away, because that was his other option, was to literally throw it in the holler and forget about it. And that's just such a waste.
And there's really nothing wrong with seconds, and I'm guilty of it too. I've been at the grocery store going, oh, that fruit doesn't look so good because it's blemished, and that's all it is.
Or one's got mold on it. You throw the one moldy one away, the rest of them are good.
Right.
It's that speaks to a whole other issue with our culture and the waste. And again, I'm just as guilty of passing a blemished fruit. But
odd fermenting techniques.
Sure.
Have you ever heard of one where they leave the fruit out in the open? It's not pressed, nothing. They let that mold form on it.
Sure.
Let it sit for a couple weeks, and you peel the mold off, press it, and drink it.
Sure.
Have you ever tried anything like that?
I've not.
It's definitely a wild yeast.
Absolutely, it's a wild yeast. The main concern with weird experiments like that is, it comes to health and safety.
Right.
For something like that, if I were to do something like that personally, you could absolutely develop unique flavor with that. And, I'll be the first one to say, not all of our fruit comes in, picture perfect.
Right.
There's a very wrong misconception that a lot of the alcohol that is made in wineries is from perfect fruit, because it's not.
It's not. You don't need perfect fruit.
No, in fact, it'll be, again, controlled spoilage, right?
Yeah.
So I would want to use a bisulfate, potassium metabisulfate, sulfur for those.
Right.
It's a sanitizing agent, and that would just make me feel okay that it was safe for my gut. Good gut health. But no, the amazing thing of it's amazing the flavors fermentation can produce, and you could do it to anything. Something that I've been wanting to do is fermented cucumbers.
That could be interesting.
It's fermented pickles is all it is, and they get incredibly sour, but they retain their crunch because they're not cooked at all. I mean, it's anything.
You just leave the dill flavoring out; it'll be fine.
That's right. Yeah, skip that part.
Yep. Now we'd mentioned the quality of fruit, and I feel the quality of your ingredients is important.
Sure. Yeah.
But that goes back to Sure, take the seconds or maybe even thirds when it comes to the fruit.
Yes.
But at the same time, you don't want to be sitting there saying, well, this stuff didn't really ripen correctly, or this is literally a bad yield crop.
Right.
But if it's already squished, maybe a little old,
yeah,
you're already halfway to the process you need.
There is a, to your point, there is a point where you decide on a pass, right? You look at some fruit and you're like, okay, well, maybe it is too far gone. The main concern for a facility like us is vinegar. If I smell vinegar on a fruit, I can't risk bringing it into this building because wine, there's a divergence when you ferment your wine. It's either going to be alcohol or alcohol and vinegar. And in the industry, we call this VA.
Yeah.
VA is, it is vinegar, volatile acidity, and bringing it into an environment with a lot of stable wine is very risky.
Yeah.
You can still utilize it if managed properly. For an example, we have a lot this year that came in. Some of the fruit was damaged in the field from birds. We went ahead and picked it all, decided to bring it in. It has some level of VA occurring in it. And, it's keeping that under control, making the right product with that. But there are some instances where you look at fruit and just go, man, it's too far gone.
Now, would you say with that process of avoiding VA, that's similar to basically just making sure everything stays
it's sanitation.
clean, sanitation?
90% of my job is sanitation.
Yeah.
In fact, one of the things that I'm doing right now with our barrels is we go through and we steam them all. Wood being what it is, it's very hard to keep clean.
Yes.
And you want a clean environment for this wine to go into because, if there's anything yucky, working around in there, it's going to go right into your wine. Your wine is only as clean as your dirtiest surface.
Right.
So we're steaming them. We steam them up to 180 degrees Fahrenheit, hold it for 10 minutes, and that should kill everything. Wood is porous, so it's difficult.
Oh, we've lost recording on the camera. Oh no, it's still good. It's lights on. That's all that matters.
Okay.
There's usually light on this side too. We're good. Which brings me back to the barrels.
Yeah.
How many times can you use a barrel?
Barrels can last a long time. I actually have a barrel over there that I was looking at yesterday. Was manufactured in 2013.
Oh, nice.
So it's almost 10 years old.
Still functioning.
Still functioning. At a certain point, barrels lose their flavor, if you will. We call these neutral barrels. Neutral meaning they impart no flavor. So I actually really like neutral barrels. Neutral barrels allow the fruit to speak for itself. Some wineries really like making oak tea. Brand new barrels impart a really heavy oak flavor. You have to be very delicate with them, or using aged out barrels. A lot of wineries will dispose of barrels in the first 2 to 3 years. Again, speaking to waste, we buy them. We buy used barrels. I'll go through, clean them, make sure they're good to go, get rid of the ones that are suspect, and we'll put them right back in operation for another 5 or 6 years. And that helps, keep less barrels burned and thrown away because
not all of them make it to be plant pots out in somebody's yard.
That's right. And it's a lot of labor, a lot of time moving them back and forth. And actually, one of our customers and employees, there's a sawmill here in town, and they make staves, barrel staves for bourbon barrels.
Nice.
And there is some discussion on the market of, at some point, white oak, which is the oak that we use here in America for bourbon, wine barrels, white oak supply is going to diminish. And it's a conversation that's beginning to happen. So with all things, consumerism touches.
Yep.
It's important to be very delicate, especially if you want to be a good steward of the earth. And that's why, one, neutral, it works out that I like neutral barrels, but two, again, speaking to sustainability for a business and for what we leave behind when we're done.
Okay. What's your opinion on wood, stainless steel, glass, plastic?
Sure. That's a tough one, especially when it comes to the end game, which is recycling. For us, stainless steel is a versatile tool because of how easy it is to clean. So a lot of our equipment is stainless steel. We will do stainless steel aged wines, especially like fresh white wines, some fresh red wines. Fruit wines primarily exist only in stainless steel. To some degree, we will use some plastic, PET plastic. It's a food grade plastic essentially.
Yep.
Excuse me. And keeping that sanitized is tough. Trying to get rid of all that, but stainless steel is expensive, so we do have some bleed over into plastic still, and probably will for a very long time. Wood is great. It imparts that flavor. There's a rustic quality about walking into a place and seeing a bunch of barrels on the shelf. It's kind of magical. It does provide a purpose to the wine as well. And then when it comes to plastic, try to avoid it if I can. There is instances where, especially as a business, we utilize a lot of stuff, making sure it's disposed of properly. Right now, as far as we're aware, there's only one place in Indiana that's truly recycling glass, and they're in Indianapolis. So we drive all of our used glass up to Indianapolis still to this day. To our knowledge, nobody's recycling cardboard or plastic. It's all going to landfills right now, and that's concerning for a business that generates a lot of trash, like all businesses do. Right. So we try to be very good stewards in handling that the best way we can. So it's tough, but we try to do the best we can.
From a hobbyist point of view, the only time I use plastic is the primary fermenter because I like something with a larger opening so I can access it. But all my secondary fermentation, glass, if I can help it.
The glass carboys. Carboys are great. I'll bleed over. I mean, I got a Demi-John carboy over here that's got stuff in it as we speak, and sometimes you got to bleed over to your smaller things, but they're great because they're easy to clean. They're durable, and it's good to know that the environment that you're putting your wine into is as inert as possible. Glass being what it is, you don't have to worry about the risk of what kind of plastic is this. So no, I think carboys are great especially for beginner stuff, and they're even great for guys that are still doing it on a larger scale.
I like my Demi-John because it's got the little plastic netting or basket around it. I got lucky and found a place that was selling basically their water business. They were selling out, so they had tons of glass carboys. Picked up those at dirt cheap, and now they sit at home, and whenever I have good enough honey, I go ahead and use them.
Nice. So do you raise your own bees then?
No, I haven't gotten into that, although I want to. A good friend of mine did. Hey, Steve, and failed.
We've had a couple customers that have tried to facilitate that because we've made a few bees before to sell here over the counter.
Sorry, I missed those.
They came really quick and went really quick as experiments. It's something that I'd like to dive into a little bit more. A good friend of mine really loves meats, so it's something that I've kept on the to-do list. But again, using local honey is important.
That comes to me again. That's one of those quality because anybody can get honey.
Right.
Sorry, clover honey, which there's a lot of in this state, is okay, but it's not going to give you a special flavor.
No.
Not local. My favorite honey is mesquite honey, which you can imagine where you have to get that at, and that makes a wonderful mead. Out here we have some blueberry meads.
Okay,
they're not made out of blueberry, but they're the flower.
Yeah, blueberry flowers.
And there's a couple of local like Hunters and a couple of down south. I can't remember their name. I wish I could. I'll try to mention you later. And they make a blueberry honey. My goal is to get enough of that when it's affordable, make a couple gallons of mead out of that.
Nice. I'd be interested to try that. That's so it's something that I've, for a winery, especially when it comes to we have the tap system over there, because we'll get some customers that come in and like, oh, I don't like wine, I'm a beer guy, and we try to appease that with the cider, but cider is still really not close to beers at all.
Right.
So I kind of, when I first looked at the meads, I looked at them as an alternative to beer. Using the honey as a way to influence and other ingredients to influence a beer drinker. So, obviously the easiest thing to look at is putting hops into a mead and doing a hopped mead, right? And mimicking an IPA, if you will. But we've done a coriander and orange peel to mimic the Blue Moon style, light ales. I've thought for a long, long time I really want to do a buckwheat honey, real dark black
buckwheat honey is excellent.
Do cocoa nibs, maybe some other. So we can't use grains. That's our limitation. No grains whatsoever. So doing everything that I can to mimic closely a stout, as close that I can. I'm not much of a stout drinker, but you know, the cocoa nibs. I had a few other things that are on my mind, but that would be really cool to influence and know that it's honey. There's no grains here, right?
I wonder if you could do the cocoa with maybe some lactic acid in there, get close to a stout in that manner. That would be pretty good. I'm a stout porter sort of person.
Are you? Okay.
Yeah.
Well, there's a little idea to play around with. If I never get around to making it out here, buckwheat honey, something that give it that dark color.
Right.
Maybe shoot for a higher ABV and do some interesting things there.
Absolutely. Speaking of doing things with other groups, have you ever had anybody taking you this and distill it?
Yes. So if you'll excuse me, I'll stand for 1 second. I'll grab up.
You're fine.
The last remaining bottle is something we got distilled a long time ago.
Oh wow.
So we're holding on to this guy here. If I can put it down gently.
Yeah.
So we made a persimmon port, if you will. Not true port, obviously not from Portugal, but we took the persimmon wine to Cardinal Distillery. They distilled it down to spirits, and then we blended the spirits back to bulk wine, persimmon wine.
Okay.
So this is a pure persimmon product. It came out really interesting. It's not aging very gently. It's, in my opinion, some people really like the taste of this, but at this point we're holding on to it as kind of like a relic from something we made in years past. But I would love to do more stuff like this. It's just finding the distillery that'll work with us and the fruit that I can get distilled down to it, because it takes a lot of fruit to make a little bit of alcohol,
right?
Especially distilled spirits.
Yeah, and I've seen Cardinal do quite a few things with the local areas. And
yes.
One of my favorite from there, speaking honey, a bit of a hang up on that. They had a honey schnapps.
I tried that. That was good.
And they stopped making it because it wasn't popular.
That's a shame.
I know.
It was actually really good. I think I bought a bottle of it actually.
I had a couple bottles. They're all gone now.
As all good things do.
Yep. All right. Future shows you'd like to, or podcasts we could cover. We talked about one could focus straight on yeast. Is there anything else you think would be interesting to?
Well, we can do like a crash course 101 on winemaking. For those that want to, how do I get into it? What do I really need? What are some, ways to skirt, the generic guides out there that want you to buy all their equipment? What do I really need? We could talk about viticulture and the side of agriculture, because there's a whole slew of, speaking to Southern Indiana, its history in wine, because there is I said there wasn't one at the beginning, but there is a history. It's a very small, maybe arguably uninteresting one, and we can talk about the direction that I think Indiana's heading when it comes to the wine industry, the possibility of growing grapes here in the future for years to come. I think would be really interesting to talk about.
Excellent. Well, let's set those shows up and get them out here within the next few months if we can.
Sure. Yeah, sounds good, man.
Stretch it out throughout the year. We got a little bit of time to go.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Thank you very much for letting me come out here and interview you.
Anytime, man.
And yeah, we'll be out again, definitely.
All right. Sounds good.
All right. Thanks, everybody. Thanks for listening, and we'll catch you next time.
Hello, Andy. This is Colin. I won't be able to get in tonight. I'm sweating already.